Okay, welcome back to F-Tag Journal. This is F559, the right to choose room and or roommate. Table of contents, basically the same. Overview, citation history, interpretive guidelines. Surveyors, what they're going to look for, actual citations, and a brief summary. So an overview. For the most part, this is a preferences-based F-Tag. Really, this is all about allowing the residents to choose who they room with, which is in the best interest of everybody. There's nothing worse than having a couple of roommates that really hate each other and going back and forth, or if they have conflicting scheduling, conflicting sleep schedules. One's up at 2 a.m. watching Walker, Texas Ranger, and the other one goes to bed at 8 p.m. That can be difficult. So there are limitations to what the resident rights are in terms of rooms and roommates and the whole process with that. We'll go through that. There is a cross tag potential for this one, and we'll mention that later on. So the citation history, it's not a rare citation, but it's not that frequent as either. It's ranked 121. There was 107 citations given in the United States in 2018, and in 2019 there were 113. Just about 62% of these come from the annual survey. As far as scope and severity, none of them were a harm tag in 2018. Looks like 13 that were E and nothing past that. As far as the state distribution, and I can see that Maryland has unusually high, especially for the number of facilities that they have. California's high, but they got a ton of 1,200 plus facilities in their state. So let's take a look. 22 states with no F559s. Texas, Indiana, Iowa, Florida, Georgia, and New York. As far as the most cited, mentioned Maryland. Also up there is Idaho, South Carolina, West Virginia, and California. So what do the interpretive guidelines say? Well, a resident has the right to share a room with a spouse if they both consent. They also have the right to share a room with a roommate of choice if both of the people, residents, consent. So if there's going to be any room moves, new roommates, switching of roommates, or anything like that, the resident needs to receive written notice with justification before the room or roommate is changed. So the key words in this little element here, because I've seen quite a few that get tripped up by the written part, so written notification. Also, there's a few citations because they didn't provide justification, so justification. And it all has to be done before the room change or roommate change or new roommate is done. So roommates can be, as you would imagine, anybody that's eligible to be in a nursing home pretty much. So it can be opposite sex, it can be the same sex, it can be married couples, it can be domestic partners, it can be siblings, and it can be friends. So pretty much as long as they're eligible to be in a nursing home, you can be a roommate. So the limitations, well, no resident has the right to demand displacement. So what that means is that a resident, or if a couple of residents who wish to room together find that another resident is in a bed that they need in order to accommodate them rooming together, they can't demand that resident is moved. The residents themselves can move to whatever available rooms that the facility may have, but you cannot displace any other roommate that doesn't wish to. Payer source not accepted, so that is a limitation as well. So if there is distinct parts of a facility or a campus and a couple of people that are familiar with each other that live in different parts want to room together, however, those two parts of the facility accept different payer sources, and both of the people don't have the correct payer source in order to make that happen, then they cannot be required to room. The facility cannot be required for them to room together. However, if one of those residents is willing to pay privately, then the facility is required to allow those two people to room together, even if their primary payer source is not accepted. It would be a huge financial burden to that resident, but if they wish to do so, that is their money and they can do it any way they wish. And then the other big one is if the resident is not eligible to reside in the facility, whatever kind of facility it is, whether it's a skilled nursing facility or just a nursing facility. If they are not eligible, obviously they cannot be roommates. What does the interpretive guideline say about room moves? Well, it says a new room or a new roommate can be very difficult for some residents. If the facility initiates a room change, moving somebody to a new room or give somebody a new roommate, the resident or family or responsible party should be given written notice with justification. And the best way to go about it and what the interpretive guidelines requires is that there is an opportunity given for the resident to see the new room, meet the new roommate, and ask questions about the pending room move or pending new roommate. So resident support, how can the facility support the resident with these roommates and room changes or whatnot? Well, give them an advance notice as much as possible. They need to consider and keep in mind that adjustment times will differ among residents. One thing of extreme importance, I would say, is that if a roommate does pass away, you don't immediately throw a new admission into that room like the next day or even hours. I know we're in the business of helping people, and people in the hospital certainly need to be discharged and they need to start progressing on their rehab and whatnot, but it's very disturbing, especially if the roommates had been together for several years and maybe they were even incredibly close. Give them some time, let them grieve, and definitely provide appropriate social services support if they even seem like they're having a hard time grieving. It would be appropriate for social services to see if there was any grief counselor that could come out and maybe discuss, and depending on their payer source, it might be fully covered. So definitely give that a look and document every attempt that you made to support the resident in that aspect. Cross tag potential. Really with this one, it's going to be about social services and them doing their job. I mean, really those sort of issues are really kind of the ballpark of social services. So F745. So some actual citations. Notice was not given to resident prior to a new roommate. Notice was not given to the resident prior to a room move. A lot of these are kind of nuanced, so they're going to sound incredibly familiar, but I put them on there because there is a little bit of nuance, a little bit of difference between some of these. There's not a ton of them. I know there's only a little over 100 in 2018. I think, if I recall, it was like 107 or 117. So I only have, I think 18 examples on here. There was a lot of same exact reasons that they got cited, and mostly it was, not given written notice. But there is nuance to these that I put up here. No written notice given prior to room change. Resident moved related to possible infection. No written notice given. There was no signed consent for a room change. Responsible party was not given written notice of a room change. Resident complained of too many room moves to find a decent roommate. That's not all that uncommon. A lot of times it's difficult to find residents that are compatible roommates. Notice given, but no justification given for a room move. Resident wanted to share a room. Daughter said no, so the facility did not allow. So in this case, they probably got a citation for maybe self-determination. I forget the F-tag number on that off the top of my head. But essentially, there was no reason that the facility should listen to the daughter when the resident is the one that has the right to make that determination. Residents sent to the hospital. When they came back, they were sent to a different room. Resident hated all roommates, and the facility would not allow a private room. This is a very difficult one. I've had just about every facility you come across somebody that would just like a private room, and they make life hell for their roommates, make a ton of noise. But the thing is, I mean, sometimes you're in a facility that you got to use every bed you can. Power of attorney was notified of room change, power of attorney was not notified of a room change. And then when the power of attorney came in to visit, they went to the room they thought their, let's say, mother was in, and they were nowhere to be found. So resident could not be found by the power of attorney. Next page, and the last 6 citations, 3 Ds and 1 E. Could not find a room with bathroom large enough for the wheelchair. Daughter requested a window bed, but the resident did not want the window bed. The facility ignored the resident and put the resident in a window bed, despite him not wanting it. Resident complained of a small room, moving to a small room, and the facility did that in order to help another resident with claustrophobia. Married couple requested a room together. There was basically too much time that had passed after the request, and there was no documented evidence that the facility made any attempt to do so. No notices given to residents during remodel. So basically they were remodeling an entire hall, and so they had to move a bunch of residents off that hall in order to let the construction crew go in there, which is great. You love to see companies putting a ton of money into the buildings, making it nicer for the residents. However, they did not give them written notice that the residents were going to be moved while the remodel was taking place. And the last one, the facility did not honor a resident request for a room change relating to the resident having a roommate that had a hacking cough that bothered them all the time. So, little summary, more so notes. Really the challenge is census versus a citation. If you have the opportunity, if you're somebody that really struggles with census, maintaining census, or you're trying to build census, and there's somebody that's ready to go at the hospital, ready to discharge to your facility, and you need to make some room moves, I mean, that's going to be a judgment call if you know your state. One thing I will say with some of the buildings I've been in, we did some room moves, but we did it in a manner that, the residents were okay with doing a room move. We would certainly try to move them to a room that had a window bed or something that improved. Maybe it was closer to the exit to where they could go out and smoke or something like that. Find a reason to sort of incentivize them to room move so we could take the new resident. So that's definitely a challenge and something to consider. But census is incredibly important. Something that you may come across and something that can be a challenge is sometimes you'll find roommates that want to room together, and they love to be miserable together. When I say they love to be miserable together, this happened at one facility where we put 2 old ladies together, and man, the amount of grievances that they came up with on a daily basis was just mind-blowing, and it was very problematic. We had to deal with it the best we could. It was not a reasonable option for us to move them apart or put them in different rooms, because they did love being together, and they love being miserable together. They love complaining about stuff together. And one thing that I think is helpful to remember is that, a lot of facilities I've been at, the staff, when they hear they're getting a new admission, they automatically just default to, God, this is more work. God, today's going to suck. It means I got to do all the assessments. I got to order their meds and all that stuff. And they got to keep in mind, and it's best to maybe frame that in that if we have a high census, that means we're helping more people. I mean, these people aren't coming to the nursing facility because, they just want to have somebody take care of them for, a couple months, feed them food and do everything for them. The majority of the people coming from a hospital would prefer to go straight home. But the reality is they're just not ready to go home yet. So if you frame it in that manner, I found that it always is helpful in terms of convincing the staff that, hey, getting new admissions means we're doing the right thing. So, okay, that's F559.